I'm Dodge Chamness.
And I'm Tristan Hurley. We have Miss Wallace to talk with us about evolution.
Miss Wallace, what's your opinion on the evolution theory?
So I'm a creationist believer, meaning I believe that God created us in the complex beings that we are. However, I do think there is evolution in the form of microevolution, okay? I don't feel that we came from a piece of pond scum in a hot pond, because if you look at our body systems, we are extremely complex. We're billions of cells, and each of those cells have a very specific function. So to think that we have evolved from this tiny little cell, or that we've come from other organisms like primates and things like that, I don't quite believe in that. But I do think that there is microevolution.
Can you explain more what you mean by microevolution?
So if we look at evolution in a gross sense, right, where they say that we've evolved from primates, monkeys, things like that, microevolution is on a small scale. So for example, if you think of a human's appendix, can y'all live without your appendix? Yes, you can. We can actually cut that out of your body because you don't need it anymore. But if we look hundreds and thousands of years ago, when we didn't have ovens, we didn't have food preservatives, things like that, your appendix was actually a critical part of your digestive system. It housed healthy bacteria there. So if I ate some raw meat because I had to go kill the deer, right, and I didn't have a way to really cook it, or cook it well, then my body had to try to fend off if it was food poisoning. You know what that's like. You just came back to school from being sick. It's not pleasant. So over time, right, over hundreds of years, we figured out, oh, you've got to cook your food to a certain temperature to kill all the bad bacteria. We add in a lot of food preservatives now. And so that keeps our food healthier for us. And because of that, we're not so reliant on our appendix to keep us healthy. You could think of your gallbladder the same way. We can cut a gallbladder out of a human being. Hundreds of years ago, the gallbladder was going to be super important to store the bile from the liver. So when I say microevolution, I'm talking about evolution on a very small scale, not a gigantic scale.
I've seen where people use the term survival of the fittest. Can you explain what they mean and how does this relate to the topic evolution?
So if we think of the term survival of the fittest, right, you could go back to the Ice Age. People were hairier back then. Obviously, if you're living in a cold ice environment, the more hair you have, the better off you're going to be, right? Versus someone who doesn't have a lot of hair. So what we saw is people who were breeding, the hairier the person, the better they were able to survive. Well, those people are going to survive longer, be able to reproduce, and pass on those genetic traits. So do y'all know who Charles Darwin is?
No.
Okay, so you'll probably learn about him in your biology class. He's probably one of the most famous biologists in history. And he studied organisms on the Galapagos Islands. And one particular species that he studied was a finch, which is a type of bird, okay? The Galapagos Islands are several islands in a chain. And what he started figuring out is these birds on one island had beaks that were suited for insects. Birds on a different island had beaks suited for eating seeds and things like that. And so what he figured out is that over hundreds of years, right, because maybe there was a drought. And so these birds that were reliant on these seeds, but now plants are dying because there's a drought, they don't have any seeds, they were going to be dying off. But these birds who had beaks more suited for eating insects and things like that, they were able to survive. Well, over time, after hundreds of years, you start to see where those birds that had the insect-eating beak were able to survive and reproduce. So it's kind of that idea, the strongest are going to survive, but it's not necessarily the strongest. It's whatever adaptation they need to have for that environment that's going to help them survive.
Do you think there will be examples of evolution over time?
I think so. And here's the biggest one that I think that's going to happen. It's probably not even going to be seen in y'all's lifetime, definitely not my lifetime, but I went to high school and we just barely started getting cell phones my senior year. All we could do was call, okay? We couldn't text. Y'all have literally grown up in your 14, 15 years of life with a cell phone that you've been able to play games on, you've been able to text on. So what you're developing are incredibly strong thumb muscles that people my age didn't necessarily have when I was your age, right? So I think what we'll see in time as technology advances, as we're doing more of this, gaming, texting, whatever it may be, you may start to see that hundreds of years from now, kids have these major overdeveloped thumb muscles because over time they're doing more and more of that. Now, is that a survival issue? Absolutely not. Just because you have stronger thumb muscles than him doesn't mean you're going to be able to survive more than he will. But it's something to think about. We also don't know what the effects of some of the technology is, being constantly exposed to radiation and things that may be coming from cell phones. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe you'll have gigantic ears hundreds of years from now because you're exposing your ears to excessive radiation from the phones or something. So.
Thank you for taking your time and speaking with us, Ms. Wallace.
Sure, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Oh yeah.